Missiles. I thought, that's it, I'm fucked, I'm gonna die.
Putin's got hell on his hands. Storm Shadow missiles destroyed the electronics factory for missiles in Bryansk. An incendiary attack by Ukrainian drones on the chemical plant in Tolyatti.
A tooth rattling, basically the sound just straight up. In
Sochi, an unprecedented drone attack since the start of the war. A breakthrough in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Ukrainian assault units advanced 10 kilometers and liberated Ternov. Active clearing of occupiers is underway in the Hulyapol direction. More than 5 years in prison for a Russian citizen for comments on YouTube. Bozik Ranyazov. Escalation in the Middle East. Iranian ballistic missiles attacked the Germans. Romania enters the war, and Putin is preparing to deploy troops to support Iran. A new war is on the threshold. Beijing threatens Tokyo with a devastating strike. Orban may step down as early as April. The Hungarian delegation is leading in the position, urgently heading to Ukraine for negotiations. Boycott at the Paralympics. German athletes refuse to take a joint photo with the Russians. Hello, my name is Anastasia Dimitrovskaya. Right now, I'll tell you the main news, but first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose each other on YouTube. This day and this night will be remembered by Russia for a long time. On the night of March 11th, friendly aerial targets massively attacked country 404. Here is the moment of a powerful strike, reportedly on a microelectronics plant in Bryansk.
This specific area is located in very close proximity to the large industrial silicon manufacturing plant situated just down the road.
No.
That is really scary.
The enterprise is important for the Russian defense industry, primarily due to the shortage of microelectronics. After the sanctions were imposed, the occupiers have been experiencing serious difficulties accessing modern microchips. That's why any domestic electronics manufacturers, even those working with older technologies, become especially important. It's literally right behind that building. That building over there, the 3-story one. To help you understand the significance of this strike, even Zelensky himself commented on the event.
Commander-in-Chief Syrsky told me that the operation was successful. The Bryansk plant, which produced control systems for all types of Russian missiles, was hit. I can only congratulate our armed forces. Well done. Thank you for your service.
Meanwhile, more and more videos were appearing. Videos with panicked screams from Russians in Bryansk.
what the fuck? Do you even know what's flying? Another one. Here.
That right there is actually a drone?
Another one. Fuck.
Subsequently, the General Staff confirmed that the Kremny-Bryansk plant was successfully hit by Shahed missile storms and added another spectacular video. As a result, a key electronics plant for Russian missiles, including the Iskander, was seriously damaged.
Today, they are the second largest microelectronics enterprise in Russia by volume. It should be understood that if we were to suddenly disappear today, a whole range of military products would cease to exist.
However, by morning, more footage of strikes had appeared. The Russian chemical plant Kuibyshev was attacked. Nitrogen, one of the largest producers of nitrogen fertilizers in Russia. In addition, the mayor of Sochi whines that the VSO has been attacking the city for more than a day, and this is the longest continuous attack on.
Next on our list is the famous resort city of Sochi, known for its stunning coastline. In addition to that, we should also take a moment to consider that
Explosions were heard in Samara, Syzran, Taganrog, and Anapa, and in the Rostov region, damage to power lines was reported. And for dessert, here's another spectacular video from Bryansk. I see it clearly. Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of you are watching us from Europe, Kazakhstan, Moldova, and even the USA. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud that we have such reasonable viewers. Let us know in the comments under this episode as well from which country you are watching us and whether those around you support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments, and meanwhile we continue on with the most interesting part. Now, regarding the situation at the front, the Pokrovsky, Huliaipol, and Kostiantynivka directions are currently the hottest spots. The General Staff reported 137 battles on the front line over the past day. According to our military, in the Huliaipol direction, the Ukrainian Armed Forces are conducting a sweep of the area between Tsvitkove, Yelena, Kostiantynivka, and Svetopetrivka. Most of the enemy sabotage groups have already been driven out of there. In addition, in the Zaporizhzhia direction, SPS operators destroyed a Russian Buk-1 air defense system. Overall, our aviation, missile forces, and artillery struck 10 areas where enemy personnel and equipment were concentrated, as well as 5 command posts. They also hit 1 warehouse, 2 artillery systems, and another very important Russian facility. And here are the shots showing how, near Mariupol at night, the defense forces struck a large ammunition depot belonging to the occupiers. It kept burning until morning. Additionally, Front Strike's SO units struck a storage base at the fuel and lubricants distribution and supply point in Makiivka. In neighboring Donetsk, SO drones hit an electronic warfare station. The Volna 3, which the enemy used specifically for protection against drones, created interference on control frequencies, causing drones to lose their targets or connections. The 425th Separate Assault Regiment Skala broke through the Russian defenses. In the south of the Dnipropetrovsk region, they advanced more than 10 kilometers and liberated a village. I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers as they hold the front and stand strong against a vast, overwhelming horde. And I never cease to admire their courage and heroism. They hold the front and stand against a vast horde and the military and the military and the military. And I never cease to admire their courage and heroism. They hold the front and stand against a vast horde and the military and the military and the military. And I never cease to admire their courage and heroism, and I, which far exceeds them in numbers. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine. And if you can't do it financially, write them words of support in the comments. It might seem that we've already hit rock bottom, but no, ladies and gentlemen, someone knocked from below. Just listen to this. 4.6 million social media pages run by teenagers in the Sverdlovsk region are being continuously monitored by certain partners. In simple terms, Big Brother is constantly watching the children. If a child writes something forbidden, the information is passed on. But what's even more surprising is that this was shared with local television by Deputy Governor Tatyana Savinova. In other words, the authorities are not only no longer hiding the fact that they're watching, but are also talking about it absolutely openly. And here there could have been a joke about how soon Russians will be getting prison terms for the wrong comments, but
a Russian citizen received 5.5 years in prison for a comment. My God.
yes, the man wrote 2 comments on YouTube in support of the Ukrainian Azov Brigade and its serviceman Denis Prokopenko, whose call sign is Radis. And because of those 2 comments, a case was opened against the man for justifying terrorism, and he was sentenced after just 1 hearing. Surveillance of children and real prison terms for comments. What's next? Foreign agent status for anyone who looks at Putin's portrait the wrong way. Another European country could be drawn into the war. Romania may enter the war, as the US has invited the country to host additional forces at an airbase for their participation. In the war in the Middle East, of course, this information is unofficial. The publication DG24 wrote to me about it, citing its own sources. And the fact that the war in the Middle East is affecting the European continent is confirmed by yet another factor. On the night of March 11th, Iranian ballistic missiles attacked the Germans. The publication Spiegel writes that the Bundeswehr troops and the US Air Force in Jordan came under attack. The extent of the damage caused by the strikes remains unknown, and the investigation is ongoing. Meanwhile, in the States, they decided to take the Russians at their word. Trump's special representative Steve Witkoff stated that the Russians promised not to share intelligence data with Iran. And in the US, they believed them, but Witkoff added that these words still need to be verified by intelligence agencies. We would love to see the faces of the Americans when the intelligence agencies actually check the information. China is threatening to strike Japan. In Beijing, there was talk of a possible attack after Tokyo began deploying its own long-range missiles. As is known, by the end of March, Japan will deploy missiles with a range of about 1,000 kilometers, which can reach China.
This is not just a dangerous trend, but a real threat that could harm regional peace and security. A retreat to a militaristic past leads only to self-destruction. If Japan dares to use force against China's sovereignty, it will receive a direct blow and suffer an even greater and inevitable defeat.
It is important to note that the main reason for the not-so-friendly relations between the countries is the so-called Taiwan issue. The fact is that Beijing considers Taiwan to be its breakaway province and seeks reunification, whereas Taiwan is a democratic state. The date of the next round of negotiations between Ukraine, the US, and Russia remains unknown. It was Zelensky who stated that. The exact date will depend on developments in the Middle East. Among the key topics of the negotiations are the continuation of prisoner exchanges, as well as preparations for a possible meeting of the leaders. The president stated that the issue of territory is unlikely to be resolved without negotiations at the highest political level. At the same time, distrust toward the current American President Trump is growing within the United States itself. Jean Shaheen, a Democratic senator from New Hampshire, stated that she is disappointed in Trump.
I am disappointed in Trump because of his inability to understand that we will not be able to truly bring Russia to the negotiating table until we create greater pressure on them. This means greater support and more weapons for Ukraine, which has shown courage and resilience in this struggle. This means tightening sanctions and increasing pressure on the Russian economy.
Frankly speaking, the disapproval rating of the American leader is rising rapidly, and the probability of Trump's impeachment on prediction markets has already reached a record 70%. Even at the end of last year. At that time, this figure was estimated at around 50%. The Kremlin is involving the GRU and Wagner mercenaries to guard the tankers of the Shadow Fleet. Finnish media report that in the Gulf of Finland, GRU and Wagner fighters have been found on 17 ships, and they are also maintaining contact with the Russian fleet. And they are present on the ships of the Shadow Fleet. These people are allegedly there to control the crew and protect the ships from being seized. It is important to note that Danish media were already reporting on the security of the Shadow Fleet in Russia back in December. And here, in fact, is yet another confirmation that the Kremlin is trying to protect the Shadow Fleet's vessels with armed militants. Russia has started supporting the Iranian regime with drones. Ukrainian President Zelensky stated this in an interview with Kaylee Noraberts. Zelensky also added that Russia will undoubtedly help with missiles, is assisting them with air defense, and could send troops there. In addition, Zelensky said that back in August at a closed meeting, he offered Trump Shahed drone interceptors as a way to strengthen relations and thank the United States for its support. At that time, the Trump administration refused to make the purchase, but last week changed its position due to a significantly higher number of drone strikes from Iran than expected. Axios reports that 2 American officials said the refusal of Ukraine's proposal became one of the administration's biggest tactical mistakes since the start of Iran's bombings on February 28th. Cheap Iranian drones are linked to the deaths of 7 American servicemen, and intercepting them has already cost the US and its allies in the region millions of dollars. Well, and now, on March 10th, in his address, Zelensky announced that Ukrainian military personnel and the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Rustem Umerov, are on their way to the Gulf region, where our guys will help protect lives and stabilize the situation. Since the start of the full-scale war, our politicians have repeatedly voiced this phrase at various international venues, but only now is the world finally beginning to understand it. Ukraine is needed by the world no less than the world is needed by Ukraine.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Ukrainian ballistic missiles with a range of 800 kilometers, the emergence of a new missile and the announcement of flagship missile development, Firepoints. What kind of action can it bring to the Russians? And what other innovations from the Ukrainian defense industry are entering the war? We will tell you more about this in the following report.
Ukrainian ballistic missiles will start striking Moscow as early as this summer. According to the designers, its tests are now in the final stage, and after that, mass combat launches of the FP9 system.
The FP9 will easily hit targets in Moscow because it will reach its target at a very high speed. For example, the Iskander currently has a speed of 800 meters per second. It hits its target at that speed. Ours will be over 1,200. And that's why we'll be able to overcome air defenses much more easily. Yes, some will be lost, but about 25% will definitely break through and hit the target.
So the missile will cover 1 kilometer in 1 second. These are incredible figures by today's standards, even for Western weaponry. At the same time, the FP9 will be at least 2.5 times cheaper than the same ATACMS. Its cost will be just over $500,000. Meanwhile, the main weapon for the FP9 developers today is the junior version of Ukrainian ballistic missiles, the FP7. This is a tactical level weapon designed to strike targets at shorter distances.
The FP7 is a kind of replacement for ATACMS. It's cheap and it's for short distances. That's 300 kilometers and a lightweight. The FP9 is its counterpart. 800 kilometers, 850 kilograms warhead. Or, well, 850 kilometers, 800 kilograms warhead. 800 kilometers is Moscow and even St. Petersburg.
The average flight altitude of the FP7 is about 65 kilometers. The warhead weighs up to 150 kilograms and the flight speed is 1.5 kilometers per second. This allows it to reach the most distant target in just about 4 minutes. Even last year, the developers of the FP7 stated that the missile was being created as a high-speed one and should match the level of systems in its class, S-400. The system was developed as a means capable of overcoming Russian air defense systems around the capital of the Russian Federation. When the appearance of the missile was declassified, it became clear that it is essentially a copy of the S-400 but much more technologically advanced and lethal.
The company has already officially confirmed, yes, this is a missile that was copied from the Russian one. It is considered Russian, but it is actually the Soviet 486 for the S-400 surface-to-air missile system. And again it was copied. This refers to its aerodynamic shape, control system, in other words, the design and composite materials. The control system, meaning the control scheme, even the layout, but everything inside is different. Even the body material is different. Composite materials are used. It is lighter than the one from the S-400 system, which was actually developed during the Soviet era. It was adopted into service in 1990, and because of this, in other words, by copying, they actually saved a fairly significant amount of work and time.
But in Ukraine, the claim that there are no analogues to our developments is not used. As a result, with minimal losses, the defense forces received an effective means of destruction, the launches of which do not need to be coordinated with anyone. As a result, the use of these missiles became an extremely unpleasant surprise for Russia, with no possibility of a retaliatory strike.
15 minutes from the moment they arrived to the moment they fired, this is really very fast in the conditions of the current war, where every minute counts. We saw how Russia lost 2 or even 3 Iskander launchers at once in one episode. That's what happens when you don't have time to arrive, fire and leave.
Speaking of the FP9, analysts say that this missile will not only be a breakthrough for our defense industry, but also an extremely important bargaining chip in negotiations with Russia. After all, it can fly over 800 kilometers and will probably be the first serious threat to Moscow. It's also important that the development is domestic, which means our partners won't be able to dictate in the end-user certificate where and how it can be used.
Ukraine is fighting for independence, so the desire to be independent is deeply ingrained in us. Right now, we can't be completely independent in terms of skills and materials, but we are trying to minimize imports and rely on local production as much as possible. We are largely dependent on the help of our partners for funding, intelligence, expertise to develop the entire ecosystem, as well as for overall political support at various levels. When it comes to skills and equipment, we try to do everything ourselves.
Analysts note that, along with the FP9, British Nightfall missiles will soon be entering service with the defense forces. Together, they are capable of inflicting tremendous losses on the Russian war machine.
If you equip a ballistic missile like the FP9, or for that matter the Nightfall, with a warhead containing a cluster munition, it becomes ideal for eliminating the remaining strategic aviation Russia has, say, for example, near Saratov.
At the same time, we shouldn't forget about the legendary Ukrainian Flamingo, also from Firepoint. According to the Atlantic Council, these cruise missiles could even change the course of the war by literally destroying Russia's rear positions.
Analysts draw attention to the recent strike by the Ukrainian Armed Forces on the Votkinsk military plant in Udmurtia, which is 1,400 kilometers from the front line. To date, this remains the longest-range use of cruise missiles in the Ukrainian-Russian war. And by the way, incredibly,
These are highly effective Bulava submarines, which serve as a cornerstone of Russia's modern naval strategy. Formerly known as the Boret class, these nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines are specifically designed to carry the advanced Bulava intercontinental missiles, providing a formidable and stealthy sea-based nuclear deterrent that ensures a powerful presence across the world's oceans. We have now shut down their production. Topol-M, ground-based operational tactical missile system and its modifications. And Yars. These are extended range and the same damn Oreshnik with reduced range. So, by and large, I would say this is Web 2.0. And the Americans and whoever else, the countries involved in nuclear confrontation, can give a round of applause. Thank Ukraine for weakening the missile potential of the Russian nuclear triad.
the successes of our missiles have also been duly noted in the ZIT community, which has essentially acknowledged that the war has entered a phase where strikes will begin to hit all across
the vast and expansive nation of Russia, which is currently the largest country in the entire world by land mass. With such a barrier-piercing weapon, this is, so to speak, a very alarming signal. It is a worsening of our position. And it is happening not only, as they say, on the military front, but also economically.
Speaking of the economy, it should be understood that the targets of Ukrainian missiles may include not only military facilities, but also oil refineries and the energy sector, which would deprive Russia of billions of budget rubles, as well as the ability to carry out terror with impunity in Ukrainian cities.
In which he gave Kyiv 3 days to resume the operation of Druzhba. Meanwhile, only a few weeks remain until Orban steps down as Prime Minister of Hungary. He is confidently leading in all opinion polls, and this means that as early as April, the main Putin lobbyist in the European Union will be removed, and Ukraine will face significantly fewer problems in foreign policy.
Despite the fact that Hungary vetoed the allocation of a €90 billion loan to Ukraine, Orban's blackmail will not succeed. The tactics of the pro-Kremlin politician have failed, and Ukraine has enough funds to hold out until the elections in Hungary.
Brussels expects that Ukraine will face a budget deficit only at the end of next month, several weeks later than initially anticipated, as Kyiv is hoping that Hungary will lift its veto after the crucial parliamentary elections on April 12th, which could remove Viktor Orban, the Kremlin-loyal prime minister, from office. Initially, EU representatives expected that funding for Ukraine would run out at the beginning of April, when the first payment from the €90 billion fund was supposed to be made. But Budapest blocked this plan.
On April 12th, elections will be held in Hungary, and according to the latest polls, Orban is expected to lose. The opposition party is TISA. It has increased its lead among voters who have made up their minds, up to 12%. 50% of voters support TISA, while only 38% support Orban's party Fidesz.
Viktor Orban, realizing that he is now trailing the opposition in the polls, is not being helped by the support of Donald Trump. He is taking extraordinary measures to preserve his opportunities, to hold on to his power. And his attempts to showcase his special relationship with Putin, presenting himself as the Prime Minister of Peace, while all the other EU countries support a belligerent, corrupt and dangerous Ukraine. This is part of the election campaign.
By blocking financial aid from the EU, Viktor Orban planned to pressure Volodymyr Zelensky into unblocking the Druzhba oil pipeline. But it seems that there will be enough money in the Ukrainian treasury until the end of April. And by that time, elections will have taken place in Hungary, and most likely the pro-Kremlin politician will lose them. This means that Orban is losing the war he started himself.
In fact, the Hungarian Prime Minister was counting on Kyiv running out of resources right before the upcoming April 12th elections in Hungary. That was exactly what the Hungarian Prime Minister was hoping for. This is precisely what prompted such a confident, pompous and solemn declaration to force Kyiv by any means necessary. Orban's political strategists, some of whom are likely connected to Kremlin structures, were counting on demonstrating political strength and a victory over Ukraine specifically at the beginning of April, right before the elections, when Ukraine would be facing a budget deficit.
It seems that the incident involving the detention of Ukrainian armored cash-in-transit vehicles transporting currency and valuables is also an element of pressure on Ukraine. Today, the Hungarian government adopted a resolution to confiscate everything from the Austrian bank vehicles.
The fact that they did not return these material valuables, but at the same time deported the cash couriers, shows that there was definitely nothing criminal going on. This is simply politics and a way to take the money. For now, the Druzhba oil pipeline is not operating.
Hungarian Minister of Construction and Transport János Lázár has essentially confirmed that the seized funds will be kept as leverage against Ukraine until the Druzhba oil pipeline is unblocked.
We know that the Ukrainians are very nervous. If we are being blackmailed, we can't be so foolish as to give in. What we did deliberately, and we will not return the money to them.
But despite such unprecedented pressure from Hungary, Ukraine won't have to suffer much longer after Orbán's departure, especially since Brussels seems to be on Kyiv's side. And despite this, the loan will still be provided on time.
Viktor Orbán no longer hides his sympathy for Putin and Russian policy. That is why, in the case of the 90 billion euro loan, as with many other issues, Europe must effectively ensure the implementation of its decisions. Hungary signed this decision. I am convinced that Europe can safely use the 90 billion for Ukraine without waiting for additional approval from Budapest.
Most likely, the Druzhba oil pipeline will not be operational until April 12th, no matter how much Orbán wants it or how much pressure he puts on Ukraine. And this will be yet another blow to his already low ratings ahead of the elections.
You cannot remain neutral, especially when it comes to Russia's attack on Ukraine, which the Kremlin falsely calls liberation. In fact, that's what it all comes down to. German Paralympians refused to take photos with Russians and kept their distance from them during the awards ceremony. Naturally, this conscious stance by the German athletes did not go unnoticed by Russian propaganda. So what angered Russian propagandists the most was that, during the Russian national anthem, the German athletes demonstratively kept their hats on and turned away from the winners of the ski sprint. On this occasion, I would like to thank our viewers for their stance. We read the comments, we see your support, and we are very grateful to you for your position. That's all from me. Please like this video and don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Ukraine Today, so you don't miss our next episodes. See you next time.